Hi, I'm Jim Bové, and I'm going to demonstrate cuttlefish casting here at Touchstone. So I have cuttlefish bone, and this is something that you can find in your pet supply store or in the aisle of your Walmart or Giant Eagle, and this would be for parakeets. So the cuttlefish bone is a really nice traditional casting method. This goes way back, very historical. Believe it or not, this soft material, which is very easily carved, can withstand just long enough the heat of the molten metal. So I'm going to show you how to make a mold using cuttlefish bone today. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut the cuttlefish in half. So you notice that I have the hard side of the bone facing down. So now that I have my half here, I'm just going to take it to some coarse sandpaper. Using a figure-8 motion, I'm going to smooth that out. I want to make sure that this is nice and flat. Sometimes what I can do is I can take two halves of the cuttlefish bone and rub them together to make sure that they're nice and flat. And if I wanted a two-part mold, I can join them together. I'm going to do a one-part mold today, so I'm actually going to tape this later on to compressed charcoal, and you're going to see that. So our design can either be an object that we already have that we press into the cuttlefish bone, because it's very, very soft. Or I can take tools and I can actually start scooping out the cuttlefish bone. You can see how easily that carves. So here's the object, this plastic skull. I made this a long time ago with plastic casting. And there it is, cast in silver. So this is uncleaned up. The sprue is still on there. I haven't done anything else to it. All I have to do is remove the sprue and start cleaning this up, and I'll have a finished piece that I can make a pendant. I thought that was kind of appropriate for the Halloween season as it approaches. All right, so you can take any object that you want to. This is a stone that's nice and flat, diamond shaped. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and cast this. One of the things that I want to do is plan out my sprue. If I take a look, here's my sprue right there. Notice that if I were to sprue this right up to the point, I'm going to lose the point completely. The best thing is to turn it on its side. So my sprue is going to enter here, and that's going to allow me to easily saw that off. So why don't we do that now? I'm just going to gently start pressing this in to get the form. So I'm going to lay it down on a flat surface, and I'm going to put some even pressure on it just to try and get. Now careful, these do crack. So once it's pressed in a little bit, I have my indentation there. Now what I'm going to do, because I want it a little bit deeper, I'm going to take one of my tools. I'm going to take this flat one right here. Notice how smooth this is too. I'm going to start scraping that. So I remove the compressed cuttlefish bone, and this will allow me to press it in more deeply. Okay, so the cuttlefish bone that was compressed, I removed that, scraped it away. Now I can go a little bit deeper. I want to go about 1/8 of an inch deep at least. So let's compress this down again. And even though I'm using a lot of force, I'm trying to make sure that I don't crack anything. And I can actually feel and hear it kind of crunching down there a little bit. Okay, so now you can see how nice and deep that is. I even have the detail of that hole that was drilled out of there. I'm just going to remove that because I don't need it. So this is actually really nice and smooth, and I can cast it this way. But the cuttlefish itself has this beautiful texture. If I have a toothbrush or a brush, what I can do is just kind of brush this away and reveal that wood grain texture that we see there. So I'm going to do that in a little bit. But first what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I'm going to make my sprue. So from here, I'm going to have my sprue come in. So that's going to be the area that I'm going to open up. All right. So I'm just going to, I could take an X-Acto blade or like a paring knife. Here I just have one of my wax tools. So I've been using a lot of my wax working tools for this. And this is a kind of a funnel shape. So now as I come up to the piece, I'm going to make sure that I don't lose its shape. And I just make my funnel. Okay? So that's pretty straightforward there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush and I'm just going to start working away at that. The toothbrush is really good, like hog's hair brush, because you can see it's really compacted there. But as I start working away, see how that is starting to lift all of the soft cuttlefish bone material. And this is a way of deciding which texture you want for your artwork. It's a little bit hard to see in the light, but you can start seeing now more of that happening to it. You could selectively remove texture for some areas, or decide after you're done casting that maybe what you want to do is you want to file an area smooth. So this gives you a little bit of options. Okay, so we're getting some nice texture going on there that I think you can see. Okay, now down there I have that little bit that I kind of carved out earlier to show you. That's not a big deal, because what I want to do is I want to vent this. So I'm going to actually bring this back up to the surface to the side of where my sprue is. So the metal's going to go in, the air is going to come out. I can even do little runners like that, and that's just a little pocket for the air to get out of the way. Cuttlefish bone is really, really porous, but sometimes you need to help it out by giving it some air vents. And I'm just going to smooth this out a little bit. Okay, so let's go over to the casting area and I'll show you how to tape this to the charcoal block. So I have a compressed charcoal block and I have my piece. The first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that there's no light coming through. So I'm going to hold this up to the light and check. So I see no gaps at all between the charcoal block and the cuttlefish. That's good. I'm going to make sure I align it with the top, and I have masking tape. Believe it or not, that's as good as using wire. You'll see a lot of books and videos, they'll show you using wire. If you're controlled with how you place your tape and pour your metal, this will be fine. If you're setting fire to your tape a lot, you might have to watch how you're doing your pour. Just get the bottom end here taped up as well. And I always make sure that my tape ends on the back, because the front is going to be hot. So I'll just fold it over there, and then I have little tabs that I can pull. I'll show you how to do that over top of water. Next, check to make sure it's not loose. If that pulls away when I pour my metal, it's going to push it away, and the metal is just going to pour right out the bottom. I have a little bit of silver left over from another pour. I'm just going to add some more to that. So what I'm going to do is just use a straight acetylene torch and large tip. that I'm heating this from an angle so the flame can go to the side. I'm going to add some borax to it. That's our flux. And I'll stir that in. I want to make sure that my metal's nice and clean. So see that nice pillow shape? That's what I'm looking for. I go lip to lip. And then in one fluid motion, I pour. Once it reaches the top, I'm done. Now all I need to do is wait for that to cool off. If I want to reclaim my silver, what I can do before the flux in the crucible sets up, I'll just pour it right into my water. So that's my reclaimed silver. And I can use that later on for another cast. In that short amount of time, this has already crystallized, so the metal has set. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over top, so all of these areas except for this are cool enough for me to hold. So I'm just going to peel off my tape, making sure that I am out of the way of any metal that might drop. And I'm going to have it right over my crucible. So my cuttlefish bone, this is a one-shot casting mold. So you can see it's pretty much burned out there. My charcoal block, however, is ready to be used again. That's going to be my hot side. I'm going to set that down, let it cool off. And let's see what it looks like. So there we go. Once I clean that up, you're going to be able to see that pattern of the cuttlefish bone in there more clearly. And then I'll have a nice pendant in that shape. I can decide to do whatever I want with it. This can be the top of a ring. I could solder bands on it and then bend it around or use it as an earring, whatever I want to do. And that's cuttlefish casting.
Hi, my name is Maia Leppo, and I will be showing you how to file and solder on a post onto steel earrings so that you can then use them with other objects that you might have around. So I get a lot of my work laser cut. So here's an example of a piece that I got back from the laser cutter. And there's always like a little nick on it and some sharp edges. So before I do anything, I have to make sure that it is filed and clean so it won't be rough on the ear. So for that, I use a male bastard file, which I just get from Home Depot or Lowe's, and it's an 8-inch. And this is like my workhorse file. It's like $8. I pretty much use it for everything that I can, except for small things, which is when I would then go to needle file. So the first thing I do is just kind of create a bevel, a very slight bevel on both sides. And I'm always filing on my bench pin, and that will give me the most support and make sure that my file strokes are actually doing something. Okay, so then once I have one side, I'm going to flip it over and do the other side. Okay, so once I've gone all the way around, I might just come and make sure just the outer edge is smooth. And I use my fingers, just if I feel anything sharp, I'll just make sure to file that off because this will be on the ear. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So depending how many I want to work on, I'll just do a bunch at a time, but I'll just do 2 for right now. So I have 2 filed pieces. So for the idea of this earring that I want to do is have the post here and then a hole at the bottom, which I can use to attach to other things. Visually, I can't tell like a center line. So what I use is a circle center finder, which is this great tool. And I just slide this shape in there. And actually, this isn't even a perfect circle, but it still will find the center for me. So I put it in that circle center and I just scribe a line. And then I'll do it to the other one. And this just gives me something to work off of. And it's on the back, so I'm not too worried about scratching into my surface there. Then to make sure that the posts are on the same spot on each earring, I use my dividers. And if I'm just making one pair of earrings, I might not go through all of this, but for a whole production line, I want to make sure that like every single earring will have the post at the same spot. Otherwise, they'll hang differently. So I set my dividers for about where I want that earring post to go, and then I just make a scribe line there. And I eyeball this, but you could measure and make sure that it's like exactly where you want it. So now I know both of my posts will go at this intersection of those 2 lines, and they'll be in the same spot on each earring. The next step is to just drill some little divots. So to make the connection of my earring post to that earring, I like to drill just a little divot with a drill bit. And this gives me a spot for that ear wire to go into. So I'm going to use a 60 drill bit. And you could center punch first if you had one. I don't have one. So just doing a little divot, and that's just going to show me where that post goes. The next mark I want to make is a hole at the bottom. And because I have this center line, I know that if I just follow that down, that will be the middle of this shape. So I'm going to drill actually all the way through now. And this one I just do kind of close to the bottom so I don't bother measuring it. And then I'll do the other one. Great. Okay, now I'm gonna go solder. Okay. So for soldering, I like to do it on a honeycomb block. I like the way that the heat moves with those. The holes allow like the heat to kind of get in there, so it's heating from both sides, which gives it a little bit more of a even heat. I just use regular handy flux, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of flux right where I want that ear post to go. Okay. And then I have 2 ear posts, which I just buy. They come. Oh, I have. Sorry. Thanks. Yeah. So those are going to get soldered onto there, and then I have a piece of hard solder. And I just need a really, really, really small amount of solder. There. So, and there's the other. So right there. Yeah. Okay. And the other tool that I like to use is Log Tweezers. And this allows me to hold my posts without using any pressure from my hands. They close automatically. So I'll put one post in there, hold it, and just make sure there's also just a little bit of flux on the end of that post. Okay, so now I'm gonna start. I'm just using a regular acetylene torch. This is a smaller tip of 2. Getting a spark. There we go. Sorry. So there's my flame. Oh wait, where did I put my solder? Oh my gosh. Oh, right here. Okay. So I'm gonna pick up my solder. When you heat it, it turns into a ball, and then it becomes a little bit sticky, so it will stick to the end of my pick. And then I'm gonna move over to one of the earrings. And I'm just heating at the spot where the post will go. So I'll see the flux, which keeps that metal clean while I'm heating it, and it will start to bubble and then kind of go glassy. And that's when I'm going to put that little piece of solder right in that post. And then I'm going to pick up our little piece of solder in that divot, and then I'm going to pick up my post to solder into that space. So I'm just waiting for that solder to slump just because of the pressure. Yeah. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so when the solder just flows a little bit, then I will bring my post over to solder it all together. I don't want to keep my post there the whole time because it's much smaller and more likely to melt than the steel. So I only bring it in right at the end. Okay, that was not great. When I see the solder flow, I'll take the flame away, but I leave my tweezers there just for a minute, just to make sure that the solder will harden. If I move them away too quickly, then it won't harden in time, and I'll actually like take the post away. So that's one, and then I'll do one more. What is going on with this? So I'm gonna pick up my solder, come over to my earring, wait for the flux to bubble, and then go clear and glassy. And that's when I put that little piece of solder down. And then I'm gonna pick up this post. Again, putting a little bit of flux at the end. And then I'm gonna heat that spot where that solder is just until it starts to melt just a bit. And when I see it start to melt, then I will bring my post over and hold it on top. And then I see the solder flow again. I pull the flame away but leave my tweezers there just for a minute. Okay, the next step is to pickle.
So I have the Cuttlefish cast skull that we just cast out there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder a jump ring onto the top of it now. So I have my jump rings set up in the cross-locking tweezers and a small bit of solder ready to go. So we're going to light the torch. And what I like to do is I like to transfer my solder. I'm just going to melt that into a ball first, and I'm going to sweat it right onto my jump ring, and I'm actually sweating it onto where the jump ring opens, so that's going to be closed once I attach it there, and it's going to be a little bit stronger. I'm just going to dip that in my flux to reflux it. And setup is always the tricky part, so I want to make sure I get this aligned properly. So I'm just going to make some adjustments, get that lined up, and try and get it centered as best as possible. So I'm looking down on this, and these two pieces are pressed together. Now what I'm going to do, since the solder is already attached to the jump ring, I'm going to apply my heat to the skull itself. And I'm going to do a nice slow heat up. It is such a difference in size between the skull and the jump ring that all of my heat's going to be on that skull for pretty much the whole beginning. You can see my flux starting to turn clear there. So my flux is keeping oxygen from getting to that area. Now I get a little bit of a glow going on with the skull, and I'm just going to make sure that I have a little pressure up against, so I'm going to push these together as it flows, and there we go. See, it just flowed. I take the torch away, and my solder has set. Once the glow has gone from the metal, I'm going to quench this, then pickle it, and we'll take a look at it.
Great, so these came out of the pickle, and so the pickle cleans off all the oxides from the flame of heating it, and then also all the flux on the back that I use to solder that post on. And then I cleaned them further with a brass brush and soap, and so that gets them kind of shiny. So because I work in steel, you can't really leave the metal like this. It will rust much easier. So what I do, and I also like them to look a little bit darker, so what I do is I heat them up and then I dip them in olive oil, and that gives them kind of this like matte black, and then the olive oil will seal it to prevent rust. So the way that I do that, so I have my flame. I'm gonna pick up my earring, and I'm just gonna slowly heat it from the front. I want to make sure I don't overheat it, because then that post will fall off, the one that We just took all that time to put on. So I'm gonna heat it. I'll see that color kind of start to come, and I'm sort of dancing with my flame because I don't want it to get too hot and turn red, especially where that post is, because that will break that solder seam. So once it's kind of what I want it to look like, I'll just drop it in the olive oil. And I'll do another one. So again, just heating. You don't need a strong flame for this. So getting kind of that, you start to see it turn kind of black and rainbowy. That's what I'm looking for. And then I'm gonna drop it in. Okay. So next step is to grab them out of that olive oil. Just put them on a rag, turn that around without being really nice. And this is just regular cheap olive oil. It doesn't have to be anything special. And then I just wipe off any excess oil with my rag. And then the last step is just going to be to clean off these posts and attach whatever I want to the bottom of the earring. And I'll do that at my bench. So here is my finished pieces. So from heating up the ring and putting that post on, it softens that metal. So to make it harder, I just use a pair of flat nose pliers. I grab the end of that post and pull and twist. And that will harden up that post so that it will go on a little bit easier onto the ear. And you want to do it so it's harder, but if you do it too much, you might break off that little nub at the end of your post. And then I'll do that to the other one. And then these two posts are discolored from the heating and the dipping in the olive oil. And so that could irritate someone's ear. So to clean off any oxides that are on the post, I'm going to use this star wheel. They're not actually called star wheels. I call them star wheels, but they're 3M micro something. I don't remember. But if anyone needs to know, you can ask. But they come in different colors and different courses. And so these will just go around the post and clean that up. So I'll do that now. And so I like these a lot because they'll remove the oxide, but they won't dent the metal at all or abrade the metal. Here, maybe that. I feel like it needs a backing, maybe. Okay. So once those are clean and hardened, I'm just going to, I brought 2 ceramic pieces that I worked on, and I'm going to attach those to the back with monofilament, which is just a way that I've started attaching some things. So I've balled up one end with a lighter to catch it. and then I'm gonna stick it through that hole that we made. Cut, and I'm just gonna leave, I don't know, I kind of estimate about how much I'm gonna need to ball it up on the other end. So cut that off, and then use the lighter to ball that up. I'm just gonna wait for that to cool. Nope, still hot. Then once that cools, then that's it. Droopy earrings.
Okay, so we have our finished skull. That's from the Cuttlefish cast, and I soldered the jump ring on it. Now I want to make it pop a little bit, so I'm going to add a patina. I'm using liver of sulfur, and I just mixed a little bit of liver of sulfur in with some hot water here so we can see that. And all I'm going to do is just dip that in there, and we're going to start noticing a change. So see how the liver of sulfur is starting to darken that? And that's really changing the appearance already. So I'm going to rinse this and then start selectively removing the liver of sulfur so that it stays just in the low areas. Okay. And actually, if we have a polishing cloth or is there a polishing or emery cloth? We'll just do the cut, and suddenly I'm magically back at my bench.
Sorry, Dean.
Lots of editing, that's okay. Okay, so there's the liver of sulfur added to the skull. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a fine emery, and I'm going to start removing it from the high spots. This is a really nice way of doing it because it's just going to stay in the deep areas, and I can get that nice contrast. If you wanted to, you could leave it on the entire thing. That's personal choice. But I kind of just want to pop the different levels a little bit. So what I'm doing is just removing it by hand. And we're going to have our Halloween charm here. Okay, and you can kind of see how that's taking shape there. All right, and that's how we can use Cuttlefish cast to make a piece very, very quickly and easily. So that's sterling silver, jump ring soldered on top with a little bit of liver of sulfur to make things start popping out. Okay, thank you.